Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder how much your brain can juggle at once? Can you hold on to information and think about something new at the exact same time? Or does one get in the way of the other? Today we're diving into some fascinating new research that tackles this very question. It explores the tricky dance between holding on to information in your mind and actively processing new stuff. And it turns out the answer isn't as simple as we might think. So the big question this paper is trying to answer is this: is there a trade-off between processing information and keeping other information safe in our working memory? Basically, when you are busy thinking about something new, does it mess up what you are trying to remember? Or if you're trying to remember a lot of things, does it slow down your thinking? Some scientists think of your working memory like a busy highway with only so many lanes. If you're trying to process new information that uses up a lane and leaves less room for the information you need to maintain or remember, this is called the shared resource idea. Others believe that processing and remembering are more like separate rooms. Processing only causes problems for remembering if the processing task itself introduces new distracting information into the remembering room. So it is not the thinking itself that is the problem, but the extra stuff that gets brought in. The researchers designed experiments to test these two ideas. They used something called a complex span paradigm. Imagine you have to remember a list of things while also doing a quick task with each item. The key here is that they carefully changed the processing task to see what really caused problems for memory. In their first experiment, they had participants do a few different things. Sometimes they just had to remember objects. Other times they had to do a simple response like clicking on an object. Then they had to judge which of two objects was bigger in real life. And finally, the most complex task involved judging sizes, but also needing to remember a new object that was part of the judgment. They wanted to see if simply doing more processing slowed things down, or if it was specifically adding new information that caused trouble. Think of it like this. Condition 1 was just remembering. Condition 2 added a simple click. Condition 3 added a size comparison. And Condition 4 added a size comparison and required remembering a new object used in that comparison. What they found in the processing part was interesting. When they added the size judgment or the need to remember a new object, participants took longer to respond and made more mistakes. This shows that more demanding tasks do slow you down and make you less accurate. But when they looked at memory accuracy, something different happened. Just adding a simple response or even the size judgment task by itself didn't really hurt memory much. However, memory accuracy took a nosedive, specifically when the processing task required them to encode a new object into working memory. This new object was not something they had to remember later, but was just part of the processing task. Experiments 2 and 3 built on this. They tried to make the processing task really hard without adding new information to see if that alone would hurt memory. For example, they had participants mentally double the size of an object before comparing it. This made the processing task much more demanding, but still didn't require them to remember the object itself. Again, the results were consistent. Making the processing task more difficult on its own didn't significantly hurt memory. But as soon as they introduced a task that required encoding an extra distractor object, the memory performance dropped. The researchers even did a special analysis to test the idea that more cognitive load just generally hurts memory. They calculated how much cognitive load each task had based on how long it took people to do the task. Then they compared this load to memory accuracy. The crucial finding here was that the relationship between cognitive load and memory accuracy wasn't consistent. It only became strongly negative, meaning higher load led to worse memory when the distractor encoding task was involved. When they looked at tasks that were just more demanding but didn't add distractors, the link between load and memory accuracy disappeared. So what does all this mean? It seems like the idea of a strictly limited resource that gets shared between processing and maintenance might not be the whole story. The researchers found that it is not just about how much mental effort you are expending. Instead, the real culprit behind memory problems during processing seems to be the introduction of additional information or distractors into your working memory. Think about it. If you are trying to remember your shopping list while also figuring out the best route on GPS, your brain might struggle, not just because the GPS is complex, but because it is also processing and potentially encoding street names or landmarks that weren't on your original list. This is super important because it suggests that we might be able to design tasks or strategies to minimize interference. If the problem is extra information, then perhaps we can find ways to process information without letting it clutter our working memory. Now, no study is perfect. These experiments were done in a lab setting with specific tasks. Real life is messier. Also, while they tried to control for processing difficulty, the exact cognitive load might still be a little tricky to measure perfectly. Future research could explore different types of tasks and different populations to see if these findings hold up. For everyday life, this suggests that when you are trying to learn something new or hold on to information, it is not just about focusing harder. It might be more about minimizing distractions and being mindful of what new information you are letting into your mental workspace. If you are studying and constantly checking social media or emails, you are not just dividing your attention, you're potentially bringing in new distracting content that directly interferes with what you are trying to learn. This research really highlights that our working memory is more nuanced than a simple one-size-fits-all resource pool. It is about managing not just the load, but also the content that gets brought in. It is a fascinating look into how our minds juggle the demands of the present moment. What do you guys think about these findings? Does this align with your own experiences juggling tasks? Let me know in the comments below if you found this breakdown helpful. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the fascinating world of psychology. And as always, keep thinking.